Allman in the Morning, Common Sense Radio.
Good morning, you bunch of drunks.
Give up forever to touch you.
So somebody is now saying, as people are trapped in traffic, they've noticed the pickle jar is gone again.
Darn it.
I have a pickle jar in my car that I was going to put up there, but somebody else put something up there. But this is Vlasic, so it's the brand we prefer.
Right.
So that I'll put if I can, I'll put it back up. I'll put another one back up there. Don't worry. Pickle jar will survive.
It will be restored.
Indeed. Senator Roy Blunt joining us right now. Hello, Senator Blunt. Good to talk to you. How you doing?
Hey, Jamie. Good to talk to you. It would be even better if I was there in the studio, but in spite of all the rain, managed to get back for the votes in Washington today and this week. And I think we're doing pretty well. I think the Supreme Court is a big long-term victory. Remember, Antonin Scalia, who Judge Gorsuch replaced, was on the court 26 years after Ronald Reagan left the White House, and 13 years after the guy who appointed him, Ronald Reagan, died. So that is that's a real long-term victory. I think a lot of the victories against these out-of-control regulators are significant, and I'm on the optimistic side of what can happen here over the next few weeks and months.
Yeah, I mean, even Hugh Hewitt, who was not a big fan of President Trump, but even as a candidate, had pointed out that this has really been remarkably successful on a number of levels. And you just mentioned the regulatory rollbacks and those kinds of things. I mean, I would venture to say that even if you did repeal or replace Obamacare tomorrow, the things that have affected a lot of our mainstream business people have actually happened already in the formulation of a lot of these regulatory rollbacks, whether it be farmers or manufacturers.
Well, in our state particularly, the president's decision to do what I'd been saying we should do since these rules came out on the power rule, that in Missouri would have doubled the average electricity bill in a relatively short 10 or 12 years. The Waters of the U.S. rule that would put the EPA in charge potentially of every building permit and whether you could mow the right-of-ways and whether what a farmer might be able to put on their field or where you could drill a utility pole hole. It just was outrageous. It had unbelievable economic impact. Those things are not going to happen. We had Scott Pruitt, the EPA administrator in the state, about 10 days ago. I was with him at the Thomas Hill Power Plant talking about how the EPA's job of ensuring that the air, the water, the environment was as clean as they could make it as their goal without destroying the economy was critically important. So I think we see a whole new attitude about the kinds of things that create private sector job opportunities. And in the courts, there are over 100 lifetime vacancies to fill on federal benches. If in the courts you have a sense when you make a decision that when this gets to court, we're more likely ultimately at the Supreme Court level to have judges that say, okay, here's what the law says. If your attorney told you in good faith what they thought the law should say, you can in all likelihood rely on that, as opposed to some judge later deciding, well, I know that's what the law or the Constitution says, but here's what it should have said. Hopefully we're moving beyond that to where people can make the kind of decisions that create better opportunities for them and their families.
So where are we at on the health care issue? Where are we at on repeal and replace, this new formulation, this new proposal, or how does it look to you?
Well, the House may pass a bill, and they're not ready to pass one yet, so I haven't looked at the final details. I think the three-step plan of let's set a date certain when we move beyond everything we can with President Obama's health care plan. Let's let Tom Price at the Health and Human Services Department get about the job of redefining what all of this law meant, and then at some point in the future we're going to have to find some bipartisan solutions on the problems that can't be solved in step 1 and step 2. But in step 2, the law itself was so ill thought out and ill defined. There were like 1,440 places in the so-called Affordable Care Act that said some agency in government, almost always Department of Health and Human Services, will later define what this means. Like what has to be in a policy, what has to be covered for it to meet the requirement of the law. Secretary Price can do a lot there, including giving states a lot more flexibility to decide in their state. But the immediate problem is that this law was so bad that more and more insurance companies don't want to offer the policy. So in our state, we've got 97 counties out of 115 where only one company will offer the policy, and at a price that's much higher than anybody would have ever thought possible.
So what happens then? I mean, so Price can do this, in your opinion. I mean, there doesn't need to be any legislation. He can do this with a pen.
Legislation at some point, but Secretary Price can do a lot. And what we see now is there's already, like in Knoxville, Tennessee, there are 15. It's the biggest metropolitan area in the country, 15 counties around Knoxville, Tennessee, where not a single insurance company will offer an insurance policy on the individual market under Obamacare. And so we're going to continue to see that market, no matter what law we pass, go away unless we clearly just start saying there have to be other alternatives to what was happening under the Obamacare plans.
Interesting. All right. So, well, I guess we'll eventually get to the point where Mr. Price does, in fact, do this. I mean, hopefully
we are, and I think he's starting that process right now. And again, that's either step 1 or step 2, but it's an important step that the Secretary of Health and Human Services can largely do on their own, and that the Secretary can also give states exemptions to try to do other things. And I think we're going to have to begin to see that happen pretty quickly, no matter what the Congress does.
It's going to have to be piecemeal for sure. Well, thanks for checking in with us. I know we're on a tight schedule, so I appreciate you as always. At Roy Blunt, Senator Roy Blunt, keep in touch, my friend.
Great to talk to you.
Thank
Talk to you soon.
That's Common Sense Radio.